You know, every once in a while, you find a single event in history that contains the entire DNA of a much bigger conflict. It's more than just one battle. It's a blueprint. It shows you exactly how a war is truly won. Not just on the front lines, but in the factories, in those secret code-breaking rooms, and maybe, most importantly, in the mind of a single person who has to make an impossible choice. The story of the submarine USS Cavalla and the aircraft carrier Shokaku, it's one of those blueprints. This is the story of how you dismantle an empire. I want you to just let that quote sink in for a minute. This isn't just some random officer talking. This is Mitsuo Fuchida. He was the man who literally led the air attack on Pearl Harbor, the guy who kicked off the entire Pacific War for America. For him to say that losing one ship meant the war was over, well, that tells you the Shokaku wasn't just a hunk of steel. She was a legend, a veteran of Pearl Harbor, Coral Sea, a symbol of the entire empire's power. So the question is, how did one American submarine, on its very first patrol, deliver a blow so precise, so psychologically shattering, that it broke the will of Japan's toughest warriors? Well, the answer doesn't start in the middle of the ocean. It starts somewhere else entirely. So, before you can even think about the hunt, you have to forge the weapon. And the USS Cavalla wasn't just built, it was proof of a whole new way of fighting. This was a war that wasn't just going to be won by brave men on the front lines. No, it was going to be won on assembly lines, by engineers, by the focused industrial might of an entire nation, all concentrated into the tip of a spear. 1.5 million. What is that? That's the number of man-hours it took to build just one of these Gado-class submarines. Just try to picture that for a second. Thousands of people spread out across dozens of states, each one making one tiny part of a 75,000-piece puzzle. It was a symphony of logistics, a level of production that a resource-strapped country like Japan just couldn't even comprehend. This number, it represents a system that could build these incredibly complex weapons faster than the enemy could ever hope to sink them. And this is what that system produced. By 1944, when the Cavalla set out, a brand new, state-of-the-art submarine was hitting the water every 17 days. Can you imagine being on the other side? You're trying to patch up your fleet, trying to replace your losses, and you just know that your enemy is unleashing this unstoppable flood of steel. The truth is, the war was already being lost in the shipyards, thousands of miles away from any fighting. But look, it wasn't just about churning out huge numbers of subs. It was about what was inside them. The TDC, the torpedo data computer, was the real secret weapon. This isn't a computer like we think of today. No silicon chips here. This was a mechanical brain. A beautiful, intricate machine with over 2,000 gears and dials, all whirring away to solve incredibly complex equations in seconds. It basically took the guesswork out of firing a torpedo. While a Japanese subcommander was frantically scribbling calculations by hand, the TDC was feeding the American skipper a perfect, almost guaranteed-to-hit solution. For the price of a small neighborhood, it gave them an advantage that was almost unfair. It was pure innovation turned into a weapon. Okay, so you've got the perfect weapon, it's brand new, fresh off the assembly line. Great. Now for the really hard part. The Pacific Ocean. I mean, it's not a lake, it's a massive, terrifyingly empty wilderness. So how on earth do you take this amazing piece of technology and find one specific enemy fleet in an area the size of a continent? 1.5 million square miles. That was the playground for the Battle of the Philippine Sea. Trying to find the Japanese fleet in all of that with just a periscope, it'd be like trying to find one specific gray car somewhere in all of North America by only looking through a keyhole. It's not just hard, it's statistically impossible. You would need an absolute miracle. Or you'd need a cheat code. And this was the cheat code. Ultra. The real miracle wasn't happening at sea. It was happening quietly in a basement in Pearl Harbor. American codebreakers had done something incredible. They'd cracked Japan's most secret naval code. They were reading the enemy's mail. They knew the Japanese fleet's plans almost as soon as the Japanese captains did. And that intelligence, it turned the vast, empty ocean into a giant chessboard. It meant the U.S. Navy could put a submarine like the Cavalla, not just in the right ocean, but in the right 50-square-mile patch of water, and just wait for the enemy to sail right into their crosshairs. So now all the pieces are on the board, right? We have the industrial might, we have the technological edge, we have the intelligence advantage. But all of it, comes to rest on the shoulders of one man, Commander Herman J. Kosler. And when his shape finally appears on his radar screen, he realizes he's found the largest Japanese fleet to set sail since Midway. And in that moment, he has to make a choice that will decide the fate of the entire battle. I want you to really put yourself in his shoes right now. Your orders are crystal clear. You are a scout. Your #1 job is to find the enemy fleet and report its position back to the main American fleet. That information is absolutely priceless. It could win the whole battle. But to send that radio message, you have to come to the surface. You have to broadcast your exact position to every enemy ship for miles around. You almost certainly sacrifice your submarine and your life. That's option A. Or option B. You stay quiet, you slip in, undetected, and you take a shot at an aircraft carrier, the ultimate prize. Personal glory, a kill that would make you a legend. But you'd be leaving your own fleet completely blind. So, what do? Kosler chose the mission over the medal. He chose duty. He surfaced, knowing exactly what was about to happen. His radio man tapped out the message that would seal the fate of the Japanese fleet. And that radio signal was a beacon, not just for the Americans, but for the enemy. Just as he knew they would, 2 Japanese destroyers immediately peeled off from the main fleet and came charging straight for him, their bows slicing through the water, coming to kill the source of that transmission. Now, Kosler managed to evade that first attack. The guy was a brilliant sub-commander. But here's the amazing part. He didn't run. He made a massive gamble. He raced his submarine on the surface all night long to get ahead of the very fleet he had just exposed. And as the sun came up, there she was, the Shokaku. He had his second chance. But now came the attack, and the horrifying price he and his crew were about to pay for it. What happened next was just a masterclass in submarine warfare. He saw the Shokaku turning into the wind to launch her planes, giving him a perfect broadside shot. That mechanical brain, the TDC, was humming away, giving him the perfect angle. He gets in terrifyingly close, just 1,200 yards. He fires a spread of 6 torpedoes. And then, the longest, most agonizing few seconds of his life, just waiting. Suddenly, 3 huge geysers of water erupt from the carrier's side, direct hits. But there was 0 time to celebrate. A Japanese destroyer was already on top of them, a wall of steel and vengeance. Kosler yelled for a crash dive, taking the Cavalla way, way below its official safety depth, just praying the hull wouldn't buckle. For the next 3 hours, the 80 men inside the Cavalla were trapped in a steel coffin. The first step charges hit just 3 minutes after the torpedoes, like giant sledgehammers pounding on the hull. A near miss completely knocked out their sonar, leaving them deaf and blind. A pipe burst, and with the temperature inside soaring, the men had to form a frantic bucket brigade to stop their own submarine from flooding. And through it all, through the steel of the hull, they could hear the most terrifying sounds imaginable. The sounds of the Shokaku dying above them, the groan of twisting metal, the high-pitched scream of escaping steam. And then, about 2 hours in, 4 final massive explosions as her aviation fuel went up, and the great carrier was gone. 106. That is how many depth charges the Japanese destroyers dropped on them. 106 thunderous explosions, and every single one of them had the power to crack their hull and send them all to the bottom of the sea in seconds. Inside that sub, the air was poison. The heat was well over 100 degrees, and every man was just holding his breath, waiting for the one blast that had his name on it. They were the hunters and the hunted, all at the same time, trapped in total darkness, listening to the sounds of their own victory and their own possible death. When the Cavalla finally, cautiously crept back to the surface hours later, the ocean was empty. They had done it. They had survived. But the ripples from Kosler's decision and from his 3 torpedoes were about to become a tidal wave that would wash over the entire Pacific. See, this was never just about sinking one ship. This was about how that single act, made possible by an entire system, helped to sever an empire's very lifeline. Because Commander Kosler chose duty and reported the fleet's location, the U.S. Navy knew exactly where to be. They were waiting. The battle that happened next was so ridiculously one-sided that American pilots nicknamed it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. And I mean, just look at these numbers. They speak for themselves. Japan lost almost its entire force of carrier planes, and even more importantly, hundreds of veteran pilots they could never replace. The sinking of the Shokaku by Cavalla and her sister ship, the Taiho, by another sub that very same day was the knockout blow. Japanese naval aviation was effectively finished. And you have to understand, the Cavalla's incredible story was just one chapter in a much larger and much more brutal story. American submarines were systematically choking the life out of Japan. They were sinking the merchant ships that acted as the empire's circulatory system. They cut off the oil for the planes, the rubber for the factories, even the rice to feed the people. They strangled the empire into submission. But just look at that last number. This silent victory came at a terrible, terrible price. Nearly 1 in 4 American submariners never made it home.
And hey, you don't have to take my word for it. You don't have to take an American's word for it. After the war, when the U.S. interviewed Japan's top naval commanders, they asked them, what really beat you? And they were all in agreement. It wasn't the big, famous island-hopping battles. It wasn't even the atomic bombs. It was the slow, methodical, invisible pressure of the American submarine force that completely broke their ability to fight a war.
And that brings us right back to where we started, back to the blueprint. Years later, looking back on it all, Commander Kosler himself put it perfectly. He said the victory wasn't because Americans were somehow better or braver men. He knew the Japanese fought with unbelievable courage. The victory, he said, came from having a better system. A system that could outproduce, out-innovate, and outthink its opponent. A system that created a situation where a commander was empowered to choose his duty over personal glory. The sinking of the Shokaku is so much more than just a war story. It's a timeless lesson in how the forces you don't always see, industry, intelligence, and the character of a single person, are the things that really, truly shape history.